Hey guys, Henry here. Today we're going to be going through and explaining Roald Dahl's The Witches. It's another film adaptation of one of Roald Dahl's numerous children's novels, following many others including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The BFG, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. And this movie, The Witches, was brought to life by a lot of heavy hitters. Officially, Robert Zemeckis was at the helm, and he's directed classics like Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Forrest Gump. And he also shares a producing credit with two other Oscar-winning directors in Alfonso Cuaron, who directed Roma and Gravity, as well as Guillermo del Toro, who directed The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth. And Zemeckis actually wrote the screenplay with del Toro and Kenya Barris, the creator of hit TV show Blackish. So yeah, there's a lot of movie clout involved in the making of this film. The original setting in Roald Dahl's novel was set in the 80s in England, and in this version they've shifted that to the 1960s and in Alabama in the United States of America. For the most part, it hits the same narrative beats, and it does introduce a little bit of diversity and also some racial undertones, but this isn't really explored in too much depth. And this movie is another movie to fall victim to the pandemic, no longer being able to go to the big screens and now being relegated to a streaming service, and now you can find it on HBO MAX. And to be honest, I think that's probably where it belongs. This film is a pretty odd mix, and for me it just didn't quite work. The script just doesn't do justice to a classic Roald Dahl novel, and unfortunately the direction and the visuals fails to conjure up any consistent magic or wonder. This film definitely possesses some intrigue with all of those big names attached, but ultimately it's not going to be a film that people are going to be talking about as a signature film in any of their filmographies. Anyway, before we jump into the breakdown for The Witches, be sure to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content from me. As always with these types of videos, there will be spoilers ahead for The Witches, so you have been warned. So we start with a narration by Chris Rock telling you how witches are real and how badly they hate children and how it's their sole purpose to exterminate them all. And then he begins to recount his own story. As a young boy, he lost his mother and father in a car crash on Christmas of all days, and he goes to live with his grandma, played by Octavia Spencer. Understandably, the boy is depressed and his grandma tries her best to cheer him up, even cooking him up some delicious looking fried chicken wings. I mean, those wings look so delicious. They would have definitely gotten me out of a funk. When that doesn't work, she whips out the dance moves and tries to cheer him up, but nothing seems to get him out of his depression. And that's pretty understandable, as both his parents just died. His grandma ends up getting him a pet mouse, and he calls the mouse Daisy. And by taking care of Daisy and teaching her tricks, and of course through the effort and love from his grandma, he eventually is lifted out of his depression. One day, while at a grocery store, the boy meets his first witch, a creepy lady in gloves with a bloody snake wrapped around her arm, who offers the boy candy. Understandably, the boy is freaked the out and hurries his grandma out of the shop, and they go back home. Back home, he tells his grandma what he saw, and she immediately identifies from his description that the woman he ran into was a witch, and she explains that she's encountered witches before. And grandma tells the story of how her best friend, Alice Blue, was chickenified by a witch when they were just children. If only Alice hadn't been lollygagging, maybe she wouldn't be a bloody chicken. And since there's a witch in town, grandma decides it's best if they leave for a while and they go to stay at some fancy hotel called the Grand Orleans Imperial Island Hotel, where grandma's friend works. We then get to meet the Grand High Witch, played by Anne Hathaway, with a very non-specific European accent.
No garlic in the soup.
No, what?
I'm not gonna lie, I was cringing at this accent. It was objectively terrible, just like my impression. The Grand High Witch rocks up with a big group of ladies, all clearly witches who are there for a witch gathering under the guise of the International Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. The next day, the boy goes to do some training with Daisy in an empty conference hall, but of course, that's where the witches will be holding their get-together. When they arrive, the boy hides himself, and they all reveal themselves to be nasty-ass witches, bold, toeless, and wide-mouthed, and the reveal is genuinely frightening. The wide joker mouth, the sharp teeth, the bending, contorting limbs, and the physicality brought by Anne Hathaway was honestly spooky and a little bit kooky. The Grand High Witch tells them of her grand plan to get rid of all the children in the world by turning them into mice, by giving them a piece of candy laced with her newly developed potion, and leaving them as mice and having the human adults exterminate them, as that's what humans would do if they saw rats or mice. they'd just exterminate them. She's planned for another child in the hotel, Bruno, to be used as an example. And as they turn him into a mouse and try to squish him, the boy watches on from a vent in the wall. And Daisy, his mouse, speaks, and she says that she's gonna go out and fetch him. And she rushes out and actually helps Bruno and brings him back to the vent, but the Grand High Witch spots this and spots the boy and drags him out and mouseifies him as well. The three mice now dash to escape through the vents and they make their way back to Grandma. And Grandma is shocked that they're mice for all of about like 5 seconds. She accepts this very quickly, and I think that's fair enough. I mean, she saw her friend get turned into a chicken. I guess she can believe that her grandson is now a mouse. And together they hatch a plan for the boy to sneak into the Grand High Witch's room, which is just one level below their room, and steal a vial of the potion so that the grandma can potentially reverse the effects. As the boy, now mouse, is escaping through a knit being dangled from the balcony by his grandma, the Grand High Witch catches them. And I literally jumped out of my chair when she snatched that sock. I was thinking, wow, things are just going so smoothly. He's just gonna go in there, grab the potion, no dramas. And then bam, her hand snatches that sock and I'm literally just shitting myself. But the witch doesn't actually realize that the boy is inside the knitted sock. She's merely suspicious as to why there's a dangling knitted sock being lifted out of her balcony. Yeah, not sus at all. She sees the grandma and there's a sense of recognition, but the hotel manager knocks on her door and she lets go of the sock, allowing the boy to make it back safely. The hotel manager asks her about what she and the other ladies want for dinner, and she requests the cheapest option, the pea soup, specifically without garlic. We then go to see grandma attempt to make a cure, but I guess doing one random try and mixing random yellow liquids with the purple potion and it turning black, it means it's impossible and grandma just can't do it. The boy is very quick to accept the failure and he says he's okay with being a mouse. If that were me, I don't think I'd be able to come to that stage of acceptance quite so quickly. Like, I'd be telling my grandma to try everything. Try mix every single thing you've got and just cook up some more attempts. I mean, one attempt surely is not enough. Because yeah, I'm not trying to be a mouse forever. I mean, living a life as a mouse is pretty limiting, I'd assume. The boy, now focused purely on revenge, hatches a plan to go into the kitchen and douse the pea soup with the mousifying potion. He doesn't face much or any resistance really, and he manages to poison the pea soup no problemo. Grandma and the gang then go to dinner to watch the show. But before the Grand High Witch takes a sip of her soup, she notices Grandma and recognizes her as the girl that she didn't manage to get while she was a child, and remembers that she at least managed to chickenify her friend Alice. And in between all that talking, the boy manages to steal the room key from the witch. But then the show begins and all the witches start popping off. After eating the pea soup, they're all turning into mice, and the employees at the hotel, even though they literally are seeing people turn into mice, they just go and get brooms and just start going ham, just trying to kill every mouse in sight. Grandma and the mice then make their way to the Grand High Witch's room to destroy the remaining mousifying potions. The Grand High Witch arrives, and just as she's about to tear into Grandma, the mice attack her, pinching her one toe on each foot with a mousetrap, and the boy flinging himself in the air and dropping a vial of the potion into her mouth, turning her into a mouse as well. Grandma then traps the witch in a glass, and Grandma and the mice go through the witch's belongings, finding a list of all the witches around the world and finding her stacks of cash. They then release the witch's cat, and the cat eats the witch. Grandma tips the hotel staff generously, and they all go home together and become a family and live happily ever after. And of course, We Are Family is playing in the background. And as we get to the end of the film, we go back to the beginning with the Chris Rock voiceover. We're shown that they've all become witch hunters and they're actually arming kids with this mousifying potion and giving them the addresses of the remaining witches for them to be hunted down. Two of the biggest things that stood out to me in this movie were definitely Anne Hathaway and the CGI. The CGI was pretty damn good. The mice looked very realistic and they really looked like they were in Octavia Spencer's pocket and in her little bag. And also the witches, they genuinely looked terrifying. But that being said, with CGI being one of the stronger parts of the film, that's never really a great sign. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the writing was so flat. At times it felt like the dialogue was just a lazy description of what was going on. And Anne Hathaway, she was so over the top. She was hamming it up. It most of the time felt like she was in a completely different movie to the rest of the cast. She had a wacky European accent and was just so exaggerated. Jahzir, Bruno, and Octavia Spencer as the boy and grandma duo, I think they did a fair job anchoring the film. And Stanley Tucci also makes an appearance as the hotel manager, but he doesn't leave any real impression. And they're just all completely overshadowed by Anne Hathaway's performance. Her energy and physicality did manage to create real moments of terror, but at the same time also felt really ridiculous. While I do recognize The Witches is probably not one of Roald Dahl's most revered pieces of work, generally the movie just lacks the world building and the magic of a lot of Roald Dahl's other work. And I didn't feel that Zemeckis as the director really managed to add any significant color or depth to this film. And it must be said, this movie is potentially too scary for kids, and it's also a bit too ridiculous for adults. And it's not likely to be taken serious by an older audience. The themes were definitely executed with a child's perspective in mind, and it feels very on the nose, with a lot of the key points just spoken directly to the audience. There's not too much for an older audience to engage with, and because of that, this film just sits in this weird no man's land. It's probably fair to say that it is a charming film, but definitely seems to be another film following on in this trend of disappointing movies being redirected to the streaming services since the COVID-19 pandemic began. And I think it's because the studios, they realized the lack of potential that these movies have in bringing back money at the box office, so there's no real point holding out on them until the cinemas open back up, and they might as well just put them on streaming services and try to at least get some more eyes on the film. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end of this video. Go ahead and be sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Cloudy TV for more content from me. What did you guys think of The Witches? Let me know in the comment section down below. Did you enjoy the film? Did you think Anne Hathaway's character was just too insane? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out some of my other videos down below. And as always, thank you guys again, and I'll catch you all next time.